Hello and welcome to our program. After North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump returned home empty-handed from the high-stakes summit in Hanoi, the two sides are now playing the blame game. What happened behind closed doors at the summit meeting, and why did it break down? Here's what we have for you today.
On this week's A Road to Peace, we discussed a breakdown of the Hanoi Summit, including possible reasons and the blame game Pyongyang and Washington have been playing. We also take a look at North Korean TV coverage on Kim Jong-un's departure from Pyongyang for his summit with Trump. Lastly, we sit down with South Korean lawmakers to shed light on the role Seoul can play to get the talks going again.
For today's discussion, we're joined by Dr. Woo Jung-Yeop of the Sejong Institute. Thank you for coming in today.
It's my pleasure.
So Kim and Trump are set to have said their goodbyes in a very friendly and warm atmosphere, but then again, they're blaming each other for the outcome of the North Korea-US summit. Why are the two sides saying different things, and which side is telling the truth?
I think that two sides are actually speaking the same thing, because President Trump and Secretary Pompeo all mentioned that North Korea basically wanted sanctions lifted in their entirety. So they did not say that North Korea literally wanted to lift all the sanctions. That means that all 5 UN sanctions that Mr. Lee Yong-ho mentioned during the press conference, that it is actually that the core of the United Nations sanctions imposed onto North Korea. All the sanctions before 2016, so the sanctions until 2013 are directly related to those WMD programs, and the sanctions onto individuals and entities linked to the WMD programs. So it did not have any impact on the economy of North Korea. So UN Resolution 20-70, and since then, the UN sanctions have some impact on North Korean economy. So 5 out of 11 sanctions that North Korea wanted to lift, it's a partial, but in terms of content, it's all of the sanctions by the United Nations. So I think both sides are actually talking the same thing.
They're just playing with words here. So what would you say is at the core of their disagreement? Why were the two leaders unable to forge a deal in Hanoi?
It's about the sanctions and when it can be lifted. So from the structure of the negotiations, that United States believe that sanction is the only leverage that U.S. has until North Korea fully denuclearizes itself. So United States has to keep the most of the sanctions until they can confirm that North Korea is fully denuclearized. At the same time, North Korea wanted sanctions lifted in the earlier stage, that with the first steps of the denuclearization. So now two sides have this structural difference, that North Korea wants sanctions lifted at the earlier stage, whereas United States has the incentive to keep most of the sanctions until they confirm the final denuclearization.
So were their definitions of denuclearization also slightly different, and was that also what caused maybe the two leaders being unable to forge a deal in Vietnam?
So that is why two sides finds difficult to reach an agreement and find the roadmap. Mr. Biegun, the special representative of North Korean policy from the State Department, reiterated several times before and after the Hanoi Summit that North Korea has never agreed to the definition of the denuclearization. So this time that United States wanted North Korea to agree on the definitions of the denuclearization. However, our unification minister, Mr. Jo Myung-kyun, mentioned last year at the National Assembly that the meaning of denuclearization is different from North Korea and the international community. So I think that the first thing that United States wanted from North Korea was the agreed upon the definition of the denuclearization.
Right. Now, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton was at the expanded meeting in Hanoi. Would you say that Bolton, who is kind of well known for his hawkish stance on North Korea, had a role to play in the breakdown of the summit? Did he have some kind of responsibility here?
It was expected that Mr. Bolton would be present at the summit because he's the NSA advisor to the President of the United States. So there was no way that he could be excluded from the discussion. North Korea's demand, the exchange Yongbyon with the 5 UN sanctions resolution was already discussed at the working level negotiations. So I think that the United States government already discussed the possibility of breakdown if North Korea insists to keep that proposal. So I think that there's an element that Mr. Bolton could influence the decision process of the United States, but it's not only the main reason for the breakdown this time.
Well, now that Bolton is kind of at the center of North Korea-U.S. dialogue, there are concerns that the U.S. stance toward North Korea could shift to more pressure. What are your thoughts on this?
There are two things that by proposing that Yongbyon should be exchanged for the core of all the sanctions, United States might have some questions whether North Korea really wanted to denuclearize itself. And second, United States see that the sanction is really biting North Korea's economy. With the combining those two factors, U.S. probably believe that keeping the sanctions intact is the biggest element that U.S. can keep the pressure on North Korea and also ultimately lead to the denuclearization of North Korea.
Now, President Trump basically walked out of the summit and he said he had to walk for a right deal for North Korea. But do you see a better deal or better agreement coming in the near future?
That's the issue and the problems that we have to consider. Right. Because now we know that what kind of position each two countries has. And at the same time, we also see that huge difference between two countries. So how to narrow that differences would be the key for the future to reconvene the summit or working level negotiations. So now the gap looks like too distant between two countries, but we have to see how we are going to narrow the differences.
Then how are the two sides going to get the dialogue back on track?
The problem is that before Hanoi Summit, there's a possibility of the compromise. So United States might be able to lower some bar to reach a deal with North Korea. And there's a possibility from North Korean side also that they are going to lower some bar. So they provide more denuclearization initiative to make a compromise. However, as two countries declare their position publicly this time, now it's very difficult both countries to back off. For President Trump, considering the domestic political situation in the United States, it's going to be very difficult for him to back off from the position that he stated in Hanoi. So now the question is whether the discussion between two countries are moving from compromise to asking for concession from the other. So if they keep insisting that the other side has to make a concession, it's going to be very difficult to make renewed negotiation between the countries.
But it's been hinted several times that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has kind of lost his enthusiasm in these nuclear talks. Should we be concerned, and could this affect the outcome of the future talks?
It might be true that because it looked like the North Korean government believed that such a deal can be accepted by the United States. So if they truly believe that their proposal was reasonable, then they probably got disappointed by the breakdown of the summit this time. However, both countries showed their interest in keeping the dialogue with each other. And that means that they know that dialogue is in their interest. Maybe they took some time for reviewing their decision-making process, which led to a failure this time, then they would come back for the discussion because they know that it's in their interest.
I see. Now, Kim and Trump both left Hanoi without a deal, but who do you think left with a greater loss? Is it Kim or is it Trump?
It looks like that President Trump was actually praised for not signing any deal. It was because that there was concerns raised within the United States because President Trump might sign a bad deal. If time goes by in the future, that there might be some criticism raised in the United States, and then what is the strategy of the United States actually can lead to the denuclearization of North Korea. So now it looks like that it's a good for President Trump, but we don't know what will happen in the future. So, and at the same time that it looks bad for Chairman Kim Jong-un because it looked like he lost this time. However, now we are going to discuss sanctions on the table because in the past that the U.S. official position was that they are not going to release sanctions until they see the full denuclearization of North Korea. So sanctions could not be on the table before, but now with this kind of breakdown, now North Korea and the United States has to talk about sanctions release in the future negotiation. So it might be a plus for North Korea.
Well, and especially because Kim Jong-un is kind of running out of time in terms of his timetable for economic reform. So I guess time is kind of not of the essence for the North Korean side as well. Now, Kim returned home from the Hanoi Summit on March 5th. Overall, his visit to Vietnam took 10 days, mainly because of a long train ride. Here's a clip from North Korea's KCTV.
이 당과 국가 군대의 최고領導者김정은 동지께서 위et남 사회주의 공화국에 대한 공식 친선 방문을 성과적으로 마치시고 조국에 도착하셨습니다. 경례하는 최고領導者동지께 남녀 어린이들이 향기 크크한 꽃다발을 드렸습니다. 당과 정부, 무력기관의 간부들은 우리 조국의 무궁번영과 우리 인민의 평화롭고 행복한 삶과 미래를 위하여 이만여리의 머나먼 로정을 오가시며 불면불후의 정력적인 대외 활동을 벌이시고 조국에 무사히 돌아오신 경례하는 최고領導者동지께 온 나라 전체 인민들의 한결같은 마음을 담아 열렬한 축하의 인사를 삼가 올리면서 뜨겁게 맞이했습니다. 경례하는 최고領導者동지께서는 마중 나온 당과 정부, 무력기관의 간부들과 일일이 악수하시며 인사를 나누시었습니다. 경례하는 최고領導者동지께서는 한영 군중들의 열광적인 환호에 담례하시며 사랑하는 전체 인민들에게 따뜻한 귀국 인사를 보내시었습니다.
So Kim Jong-un chose a 60-hour-long train ride instead of taking a flight to Hanoi. What do you think was behind this decision?
So I think that the North Korea truly believed that there was going to be a success in the summit because he showed this kind of like travel by train. It is for like domestic audiences of North Korea, basically. And it's a very rare case in the North Korea that they reported almost like on time every events that's happening in Hanoi. That's because I think North Korea believed that something really good is going to happen to Kim Jong-un and North Korea by this summit. But now it turned out that it's not going to happen as they wish it. So they have to manage their public opinion in the domestic politics. So I think it's going to take some more time for them to calm it down in North Korea.
So it wasn't reported on North Korea's state media, but then again, the news of a no deal is going to be of a disappointment for the North Korean officials and the North Korean people. What do you think of this?
It is true that North Korean elites are going to know about this failure of the summit. So probably there's going to be another propaganda from the North Korean government that this is a part of process, not the end of the negotiation with the United States. And also the North Korea's state media already mentioned that there's going to be fluctuations in the journey to the peace. So I think that North Korean media is going to say that this is not a failure, this is just part of process.
And do you think Kim Jong-un will face some kind of criticism or difficulties in his internal political circle?
I think that it's almost impossible considering that the government nature of North Korean government, even the apparent failure of the summit, and that can be attributed to the strategy that North Korea took this time. But Chairman Kim Jong-un was supposed to be the perfect figure in North Korea without any deficiency or any failure. So I don't believe that there's going to be any criticism raised within North Korea this time.
Now, Kim Jong-un headed straight to Pyongyang after his Vietnam visit, and he didn't stop by Beijing as many had speculated. Why do you think that is?
First, probably North Korea did not expect this kind of outcome. So if they truly believe that there is going to be a success, it might be shocking for North Korean government. So they need some time to review the process. And second, there's some important political events in China going on, which is 2 sessions. So it's practically very difficult for President Xi to squeeze a schedule to meet Chairman Kim this time.
I see. Now, on his way back to Washington, President Trump reportedly called South Korean President Moon Jae-in and asked him 7 times to mediate dialogue with Kim. We met with South Korean lawmakers to discuss Seoul's role in the aftermath of the failed Hanoi Summit. Let's take a look.
After the much-anticipated summit in Hanoi broke down, U.S. President Donald Trump, en route to Washington, called South Korean President Moon Jae-in to explain the summit's outcome. During the 25-minute phone conversation, President Trump called on the South Korean president to help mediate future dialogue with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. As a result, there is now renewed attention on the mediator role Seoul is expected to take up. A day after the second Kim-Trump summit, during a ceremony marking the centennial anniversary of the March 1st independence movement, President Moon weighed in on the abrupt end of the summit.
이제 우리의 역할이 더욱 중요해졌습니다. 우리 정부는 미국, 북한과 긴밀히 소통하고 협력하여 양국 간 대화의 완전한 타결을 반드시 성사시켜 낼 것입니다.
South Korea's political parties expressed regret over the outcome of the summit. The ruling Democratic Party of Korea said it was more of a temporary suspension than breakdown of the meeting, but still showed visible disappointment.
예, 아쉽게 생각을 합니다. 그런데 두 정상이 이제 서로 만나서 그 본인들의 뜻을 서로 이제 많이 확인을 했기 때문에 폼페이오 장관이 말한 것처럼 몇 주 내에 더 새로운 진전이.
The centrist 바른미래 Party said Pyongyang and Washington are going through a growing pain to reach complete denuclearization, adding the meeting still yielded meaningful progress.
이제 열쇠를 김정은 위원장이 쥐고 있는 만큼 비핵화에 확실하게 내놓을 것을 내놓고 그리고 미국을 설득을 하고 제재 완화를 통해서.
Sharing his first National Security Council meeting in 9 months on March 5th, President Moon said he is confident Kim and Trump will reach an agreement, but added he doesn't want to prolong the impasse in their talks. Moon asked council members for their assistance in maintaining dialogue between the two.
제재의 틀 내에서 남북 관계의 발전을 통해 북미 대화에 도움을 줄 수 있는 방안들을 최대한 찾아주기 바랍니다.
South Korea's rival parties saw eye to eye on the importance of Seoul's role at this critical juncture, but held different views on what the role should entail.
한반도 평화 정착이나 비핵화는 우리한테 굉장히 중요한 문제고 저희로서는 북한 정부나 또 미국 정부에게 어떻게 해서든지 합의를 이뤄낼 것을 좀 원하고 있는 상황에서 저희가 비관론을 얘기할 수는 없는 거 아니겠습니까? 그래서
While the ruling party urged the government to take an active role in fostering dialogue and building trust between North Korea and the U.S., the opposition party stressed the role of a calm and rational mediator.
실제 북핵 상황은 얼마나 엄중한지 또 우리의 현실을 명확히 보여준 이런 결과라고 생각합니다.
그리고 미국하고 북한이 뭐 하루 이틀 무슨 뭐 감정 가지고 있는 거 그게 하루아침에 풀리겠어요? 찔끔찔끔 아마 풀릴 겁니다. 근데 막 우리는 급하지요. 우리 정권만 급해요. 또 북한도 급하고.
In the meantime, Seoul and Washington decided to scale down their joint military exercises held every March. President Trump cited the heavy cost of the military drills as the main reason for the reduction in scale. But some watchers argued there's more to the story. Seoul's defense ministry said no decision has been made about the fate of other joint exercises.
지금 시점에서 미국과 북한이 상호 간에 이 회담 결렬 이후에도 신뢰를 보이고 있기 때문에 괜한 자극이나 이런 것은 할 필요가 없을 것 같고 그런 면에서 미국 측에서 회담이 결렬된 이후에도 한미연합에서 대규모 훈련을 하지 않겠다. 그리고 북한 측에서도 여전히 핵실험이나 대륙간 유도탄 실험을 하지 않겠다고 밝힌 것은 상호 신뢰를 확인하는 의미가 있다고 생각을 합니다.
Another point of interest is the possibility of an inter-Korean summit. Following President Moon's visit to Pyongyang last September, speculations were rife that Kim Jong-un would make a reciprocal visit to Seoul by the end of the year. But it still remains unclear when this will happen.
이 남한 방문은 김정은 입장은 최대한도 경제적인 뭐를 얻고자 해서 딜을 할 텐데 우리 한국에서 쉽게 할 수가 없어요. 미국이 다 보고 있습니다. 유엔의 제재에 어긋나는 행동을 하면 그거는 정말 앞으로 더 어려워지죠. 그래서 쉽지는 않을 겁니다.
With Pyongyang and Washington at a major impasse over denuclearization and sanctions relief, the idea of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula once again seems like a distant goal. But what's clear now is that the summit breakdown is part of an ongoing process, and the role of South Korea and other neighboring countries has become much more prominent.
회담 결렬 이후에 단기적으로 새로 정상회담이 있지는 않더라도 실무선에서 접촉이 있을 것이고 또 직접적인 방법이 아니더라도 뭐 중국이나 일본 그리고 러시아나 특히 대한민국의 중재자 역할을 통해서 상호 접촉은 계속 있을 것으로 생각을 합니다.
President Moon has been the principal mediator when denuclearization talks between North Korea and the U.S. have faltered. After the Hanoi Summit breakdown, eyes are again on the South Korean leader and how he will mediate a breakthrough this time and help narrow the gap between the two sides.
So President Moon has been burdened with the role of trying to reverse the current situation, but what exactly can he do at this point between the two sides?
So it is true that the options that South Korean government can play is limited by the publicly stated position of the United States and North Korea this time. However, our government approach is for two countries not to deviate from the track of the negotiation with each other. So that is why our government is trying to persuade the United States that releasing some sanctions would be the kind of key for North Korea truly commit themselves to the negotiation. At the same time, our government show North Korea that our government is trying to make up the process with the United States for the North Korea. Either send some message to North Korea that South Korean government is actually the true friend and the kin of North Korea in this process, so North Korea can be dependent upon the role of South Korea, so North Korea can talk very frankly to South Korea. So I think that's the kind of message that South Korean government can send to both countries, and by sending those kind of messages and by proposing some kind of ideas with regard to the sanctions relief, South Korean government can play that kind of role.
But some also criticize President Moon for pushing inter-Korean cooperation projects too much when, at the moment, the U.S. isn't ready to alleviate the sanctions on North Korea. So what is your take on this?
At this stage, it is very difficult for the United States to accept those kind of proposals by the South Korean government. However, considering that the changed mood or atmosphere within the U.S. government, continued efforts by the South Korean government make United States think about more on the sanctions relief issue and its relation with the denuclearization process of North Korea. So I think in that way, we can appreciate the South Korean government efforts in that front.
I see. Now, we were also expecting a reciprocal visit by Kim to Seoul, and it was supposed to happen sometime after the North Korea-U.S. summit, but at this point, it seems like it's going to be delayed. What are your expectations?
So Chairman Kim was supposed to visit South Korea in year 2018, but it actually did not happen because there was no real progress between the United States and North Korea. So now, without making any real progress this time in Hanoi, it is unlikely that Chairman Kim is going to visit Seoul. However, if Chairman Kim and North Korea think that visiting South Korea is one of the ways that they can turn the situation favorable to their interest, they might consider visiting South Korea an option for them and increasing the possibility of enhancing their negotiation position.
Okay, well, Dr. Woo, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
North Korea, the U.S., and the international community are still reeling from the shocking outcome of the Hanoi Summit. We hope the two leaders can quickly revive the momentum of dialogue. And this is all we have for you today. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.